Welcome to this episode of Insights with Ovationz. I am your host, Aaron Ellis. Today I am joined by Merril Hoge. Now, Merril is an 8-year NFL veteran and ESPN on-air commentator and analyst. Former, by the way. He is a best-selling author and international speaker, as well as an advocate for various causes. Merril, welcome. I'm looking forward to diving in.
Aaron, I'm looking forward to this. Been looking forward for a long time, actually. So
Yeah, I know we connected. I really was excited when I connected with you last fall. I know we had some similarities. I had so many calls during that time, but I did go back through my notes. I made some notes. So there's some things I want to chat on today and just see where they go. But one of the things I always like to hear is your journey. What led you to doing what you're doing today? Right? Meaning we know there's the NFL history. I believe you played for the Steelers originally and then went to the Bears. But what led you to what you're doing today, actually?
Well, if I go right to the actual point, I was sitting in a chemotherapy chair and I was sharing the journey, how Find a Way had helped me live a dream and how it became instrumental in that battle against chemotherapy. I had just had a portion of my treatment, which ironically is called Red Death, which is the most toxic part of the treatment. And a good friend of mine, he's like, Merril, I knew nothing about that. He goes, you need to write a book on that. And I actually turned to him and I said, Charlie, if I survive, I'll write your book. And I'll be honest with you, I just did that because writing a book was of zero interest. Never thought in a million years I would write a book. Didn't want to write a book. I just wanted to survive, and that's where I was at that time. Now, to his credit, about a year after that, once I'd gotten through treatment and finished up all the brutal chemotherapy that I had to do, and I got to a different space. He circled back and he said, remember that promise you made me? And I'm like, what promise? Remember that book you said you'd write? And I was like, yeah, I do, Charlie. And that's where it started. So I went on the journey of finding a way to write a book. That was not easy. I spelled because BEC OUSE wrong 36 times in one of my final papers. So that tells you how qualified I am to be a writer and write a book. Obviously, there's more editing skills and tools today than existed back when I typed that out in 1982. But that was a journey in just doing that process, and that really has been the foundation and set me up to where I am today.
Wow. So I have a note here from the past about your I know you're an advocate of various causes, but I have a note saying that you're an advocate of mental health awareness and mental health.
Correct. And here's my passion with it. There's just so many things that are misunderstood, and from a mental health aspect, a lot of people think that physical trauma creates the mental health issues that we have, and what they don't realize is emotional trauma is a lot bigger factor than physical trauma. And emotional trauma, I'm working on a book right now called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And I'll use simple terms so people can understand them versus the psychological terms. Like there's internal environment that we all lived in a home. So you could experience things like this, which I did, death, physical abuse, mental abuse. There's a list of about 10. Then there's the social side of it, being bullied, racism, financial difficulties. So there's a bunch of stuff that affects you as you grow up. Now, there are things that can help us through that process and remedy and work through it. Okay, sports is a great avenue of that. And that is where it really struck me, is because I'll give you an example. So my mom died when I was young. I found that the only time I had peace when I was at football practice, when I was in an environment that what I would call my sanctuary at that time. And anybody can have a sanctuary, where they can go, where they can find tranquility and peace, and harmony, and, not have to deal with the heavy burdens of what you might be dealing with at that time. And so I really understood it there and identified with it. So I've done a lot of research on it, talked to some of the best in the world, and we're doing a process of writing that, because what I really discovered is probably the most significant, because I experienced it. I lived it. I was on
Yeah.
a couch. I was, I lost my NFL career in the middle of the season. I went into cardiac arrest, laid in intensive care for days. And when I come out of that, my career was over. And I had no hope. I had no purpose. I
Nothing.
had nothing. And I laid on the couch for a long time, and I was in a dark space. And when I do a presentation, I do refer to this toxic blender of pointing fingers, casting blame, and making excuses. I refer to that toxic blender because if you get in that and you start doing that, you will stay there forever and you will never garner any success ever, ever. Then it comes the most critical part of really a majority of mental health situations, a mass majority. I'm talking in the 90 percentile. There's ownership that you have to take the initial step to do something for you. You're responsible for you. We're all responsible for ourselves.
Yes.
There's nothing out external in my environment that controls me. If it does, then I am its prisoner. I am responsible for where I'm going, what I want to do, and what I want to be. And now listen, I have to know these things. You have to have, well, let's put it this way. The best way to know them is to have lived them. And laying on that couch and going through that process, being in that blender, doing all those things that were toxic and disruptive and destructive. It was those words, find a way again, that gave me this glimmer of hope where, like, you need to find a way. Okay. Your football journey's over. Okay. Something you've been doing for 30 years is over. Okay. You're 30 years old. I had done some work on my life's work, some other things. Never thought it was going to happen at that point. It didn't happen on my time.
Yeah.
And life doesn't happen on our time all the time, which is, part of what can send people in a spiral and in a bad direction, which it sent me. But I realized I had to get off the couch. I realized I had to get off and do something. And I go back to those words, find a way. When I was age 12, they inspired me to do one thing on my journey to play in the National Football League when I pinned that goal up in my bedroom on my cork wall that I had my dad build me. Man, I looked at it and I'm like, it inspired. Those words, find a way, popped into my head. And they ignited me. They gave me an energy. They sent me on a journey. They did many things for me on that day that I did not realize. But the one thing it did for me on that day that it still does for me to this day, that is a responsibility that everybody has. It does not matter about your circumstance, the hand of cards you were dealt, the circumstances that may have come your way with your fault or not your fault. You have to take ownership and you have to apply action to your journey, to wherever you're going. You're responsible for digging it out. You're responsible for how you handle it. You're responsible for what kind of tools and habits and patterns you're going to develop to move forward. And that was probably the most critical moment where find a way. I go back to age 12, but man, at age 30, it was resurrected into my life of doing something about my circumstances. And I got out of the blender. I got out and I started to do things that were in a proactive manner. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, everything just was beautiful and happy ever after. It was like a 5-year journey. But like, once I did that, things started to move forward. I mean, sure, you have your lumps. I didn't just go smooth sailing, but had I not made that initial step, that's what the real point is. You have to make that initial step. And then, yes, there are resources for help. That's what this book is about, how you can help yourself and the things that you can do through the process in helping yourself work your way out of whatever state you're in from a cognitive, emotional state. And there's valuable tools a person can develop and apply to get them out of that and stay out of that. And so that's what the book is about. And that's why I'm passionate about it.
What's the title of the book, Merril? What's the name of the book?
Right now it's ACEs.
Okay.
By the time we publish it, we might change it a little bit, but ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
And really it applies to all ages because, Aaron, what we want to do too is like, what is damaging is that, I'll give you an example, is that when we don't really rehabilitate or identify and repair and recover, we pass it on. And I've always been confused by that because I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If you lived something and you know it's that bad, you're the expert at it. Why would you ever pass that on? whatever, the trauma was, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever. Why would you do that? You know, I because I lived in an environment that was very much like that, and now to my dad's credit, my dad did call me one day and he was like, "I'm sorry for the things that I did to you."
Wow.
But he did the one thing you can never do when you apologize. You can never create an excuse after it.
Ah.
Because he then said, "Well, that's how I was raised." That's an excuse.
Good
That's why I
point.
go back to
It
you're the
almost
expert.
deflates. To me, it almost deflates what was just said. It's almost like a step forward and a step back,
Oh,
energetic.
completely. No, it doesn't. It's over.
Yeah.
That is not an apology. It's an excuse.
Wow. Hey, Merril, let me ask you a couple questions here because literally you just gave us like 10 minutes of gold there, honestly. Like I recommend everybody, we're at 10:49, go back and listen to all that again because you put so much in there. And I want to talk about some of the through lines that I think are really, really amazing. And one of the things I love to do is see like the integrity, structural integrity of what people talk about. And I have a couple questions. There's two directions I want to go here. So you talked about this blender. You talked about one thing that was new to me is I know that obviously I knew you were a former NFL player, and I understand the mind of people who've achieved at a high level and then seek to do something else. But to hear that your career ended in the middle with a cardiac arrest in the hospital, like you didn't even choose it. You didn't even know that, okay, maybe I'm going to move on to something else. It just happened. So can you share any sort of identity crisis you had? I know you said there was a 5-year point. You talked about the blender, but what really was that turning point for you where you said, I need to do something different? And what did it look like leading up to that? Did you, when we talk about mental health, and I really want people to know that they're not alone in this stuff, and I can share my perspective on like the things I've gone through in my transitions, but what did you go through? What did it look like, the good, the bad, and the ugly? And obviously we know where you're at today, but can you share on that point, that moment?
Yeah. Well, I was completely empty. I was
Yeah.
completely empty. When people talk about having no hope, I had no hope, no purpose, man, no purpose. I've always known my purpose is vital. Purpose is personal. Okay. Because I can wake up and go, boy, I can list, if I go golf and I work on watching tape and I speak, man, that's my purpose. And if I gave somebody else that, they'd be like, that ain't my purpose.
Yeah.
That don't sound interesting to me, so purpose is personal. But you got to have a purpose. And really, COVID was a great, what's the word I'm looking for, a trial run or an example of a lot of people's purposes were altered, changed, shifted. Maybe you had to get a new purpose. Maybe you end up, there's a lot of people who maybe lost, their initial purpose. So that exercise is pretty fresh in people's mind.
Yeah.
And then you never know how you're going to handle that loss. And, you did make a good point. And that was probably what hit me the hardest is how it ended. It ended right in the middle of a season. I had just signed a 3-year deal with the Chicago Bears. I was in my prime.
Wow.
I wasn't at the end of my career. I was in the prime of my career. I just went from my favorite team to my next favorite team who had my favorite player, Walter Payton, on it. I'm living a kid's dream at age 30, and I'm almost a decade in the National Football League as a starter too. Now I didn't just make a team. I started from the day I entered the field. I had the longest active starting streak in the NFL at that time at 123 games. And I only say that because like everybody who played the game, if you get into that number as a running back, like everybody respects it. And I was proud of that. And it all ended. I mean, it was over. And there was not a lot of tools. There's no tools. They're sending me to counseling. And every time I went there, I'm like, I'm never going back because that ain't helping me. That ain't helping me. That person knows nothing about what I'm dealing with. They're giving me garbage. And I'm not saying all counseling like that. For me, it was garbage. For me, It was not helping me. It was talking about things that were absolutely irrelevant, didn't have any clue of where I stood, the positioning that I was in. And I go back to that ownership aspect. It wasn't until I took ownership and go, you know what, I got to do something about this. Okay, I got to quit. I got to turn that blender off, get out of the blender. And I'll tell you, the first person that I and I had people who had called me and reached out to me, and that's why, I think that messaging of reaching out, whether you reach out or somebody else reaches out, is a really good thing to have. But Lynn Swann had reached out to me. Now, I had done some things in the off season. I had a great leader, a great mentor, one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history. That was the greatest man I've ever met, who gave us great counsel about not just football, but about life. And he used to talk about, he says this all the time, men, football is not your life's work. I don't care how good you are, how long you play. You're not going to play it longer than you do play it. And when I heard this my rookie year, I'm back there going, what? Like,
Yeah.
no, I think I'm going to play this a long time. He's in his like 30th year in the National Football League as a coach, Chuck Noll, I'm like, nah. Well, then I played one game, and I'm like, oh, I think he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But I listened to that, and I'm like, and had I not had that piece of counsel and listened to it and applied it, you can listen to stuff and not apply it. Listening is one thing, applying is a different thing. And I wasn't going to go back and finish my school, which I did. I went and finished my school. And then I worked on other things in the off season, did some exploring to find out what would I want to do with my life's work when I'm done. And I fell into kind of broadcasting. I never thought about that until I got asked to do a radio show. I walked into a studio and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a studio before. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, that's what sparked my broadcasting career. But I did stuff in the off season and during the season for that. So I had worked in some avenues and created some an artery system and relationships and channeled some purpose in those areas. And Lynn Swan was, on the ABC college crew, their number one crew. And being a former Steeler, he had reached out to me and asked if I was just interested in coming and shadowing them. They were in Champaign, Illinois. Michigan was coming into play, the Illini, Illinois. And I wasn't that far where I was in Chicago. So I got a car to take me down and spent a couple of days with the entire crew. And that's Jackson, Greasy, and Swan. And, that was an initial step. And I've told Lynn many times, I just appreciated his generosity and genuine kindness. And that helped me so much at a critical time. That's why I'm really sensitive to that. I try to, do those things when I'm aware of them with other people that might be the thing they need, just an extended hand or arm. But they still got to do the work.
Yeah.
Like go back to Lynn left me a message. I never called him back. Okay. Well, once I called him back, then things changed. Okay. It didn't change when Lynn called me. It changed when I called him back.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And that's ownership, and that's why I try to, we have, and what we have is this doom and gloom of mental health and all these emotions that you cannot fix yourself, or that there's medication. And actually, I'll make this point. I found out that when you look at the process, the step of medication, now there's a small percentage, it's like a 1%, but they really probably need medication off the bat. Most people do not need any medication off the bat. That's the last thing you go to. Yet it's the first thing that we offer. And so you're fighting a system, and people think, oh, I just need a medication. Nah, okay. I talk about this all the time. Do you control your mind, or does your mind control you? Yeah. Okay. So when and what they have done a good job of is saying, you need medication. They don't. No, you need tools to help you control your mind, create different patterns, habits, plans, take ownership. See, and ownership doesn't mean it's your fault. Okay, it might be you might have created this, but ownership is about, okay, it's over. I'm breaking the chain, I'm ending the cycle, and I'm creating a different pattern for my life, and I'm moving on. That is a powerful thing when you can do that. It's when you sit there and harbor what happened to you in the past. Okay, well, guess what? We're going this way. There's a future. I
don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm looking at the time. There's something I really want to have you shift on, because you're really articulate and know what you're talking about on this stuff. So I want to bridge another piece of the puzzle here that you've already talked about. And you're talking about ownership. And you've also talked about childhood trauma. And we know that you were in chemotherapy. There's cancer involved and stuff like that. I spent a lot of time working with a lady named Louise Hay when she had cancer, and working with other cancer patients and helping people understand the mind-body connection to what in this day and age, a lot of things are called lifestyle diseases now. I'm able to show pretty much anything as a lifestyle disease or based on the mental, emotional, mind-body connection. I'm curious on what you found with that, with yourself, with what you've dealt with, like on the dis-ease in your life, or disease in your life, or cancer or whatnot, and how you're sharing that with the world, like helping them understand. You basically have been talking about this whole time about the last thing. We don't need medication first, it's more last. But can you talk on your perspective on the mind-body connection of all the things that we're feeling, people are feeling in their body, and how it connects to what's going on up here?
Well, the listen, you hit a very important word that I emphasize, I believe in, and that is lifestyle. These three things are going to dictate your short and long-term health, my short and long-term health, everybody's short and long-term health: age, genetics, and lifestyle, to about a 90 percentile. And I use 90 percentile because there's always that wild card and those outliers, that. And the only thing that you have full control over is your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Your greatest asset, you get one of them, and that is your body, and how you take care of it. And so many times what's interesting is people talk about, well, what about mental health? I go, taking care of your body. Okay, this is still attached to it. Okay,
Yeah.
blood flows and oxygen flows up here. How we get this circulating and how we get it moving and how we practice it and develop it, that is a vital component to healthy lifestyle, from nutrition to exercise to things that you feed yourself, that you absorb in and you focus on. That is a vital component. It has saved me from going into cardiac arrest, having to rebuild my life, to cancer, to open heart surgery, having invested in my health. Every situation I've been in. Well, I'll give you open heart surgery, for example. They said it was going to be 6 weeks to recover. I went, I got out, I worked out 5 days later after open heart surgery. I was back to work in 10 days. And that was a product of the health I brought into it.
Yeah.
That helped me withstand what I was about to go through and endure. So I can't emphasize that enough to people. Like, if you, and you can always turn the clock back. I get to almost everybody as a kid in junior high and high school were probably in pretty good shape, and they were active, and they were doing all kinds of things from a movement aspect. And they probably felt really good about themselves. And then as you got into college and a lifestyle of business, work and blah, that became secondary.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a real priority. Well, you can reprioritize that. You can turn back the clock. You can get your health back, and you can do it at any point. And the quicker that you learn that, and the quicker you start doing it, and it becomes a part of your routine, what you do in the morning. Because here's what I do. I am the most important person for 2 hours every day, and that's from 6 to 8. And I invest in me. And what that does is that makes a better me for everybody else.
Yeah.
For my kids, my family, or whoever I'm going to speak to, or whatever I'm going to do, it makes me better when I take care of me. And that's not a selfish thing. Now, it can be. People can get so absorbed in themselves. That's all about it. Well, that's the wrong way to go. That's not what I'm talking about. It's when you've taken care of yourself so you can be the best to serve others.
Yeah. Merril, we're past time. Honestly, I wish we had an hour to tell you the truth, because there's so much here to unpack. It's been honestly amazing. So before I pass to you for some final thoughts here, I always recommend people go back and listen. There's so much here. I do want to have you on again. Definitely want to have you on again, because there's things that we didn't even touch on that I think the way you expressed yourself on the things that we did talk about, I have to capture you expressing yourself on the other things that I wanted to ask you. So just because we're at time, Merril, what do you want to leave everybody with? Some final thoughts, or what are you doing now? What would you like to point them towards? I know you got a book coming out. I'm going to pass it to you for final thoughts today.
Well, really my passion has been sharing the message of find a way, because find a way, when somebody asks me, well, when you speak, what's your goal? And I'd never been asked that before, because it's always the client's goal, and that's my goal. And then I thought about it again. I'm like, actually, I do have a goal. Every time I speak, if they're thinking about me and talking about me at the end of it, I did a bad job. But if they're thinking about themselves and what they control, what they have, the tools they have control over, what ownership they can do, the powers they create to apply to whatever their journey is, then I've been successful. And I usually end with one quote by Aristotle, which ends up being the foundation of my journey. I discovered it as a kid on accident. I didn't even know who Aristotle was. In fact, I don't even know why I read the stuff he had written, but the more I read, the more interested I become. And when I read it, the truth and power to it still resonates with me today. That's why I share it today, because it is true. And it's, we are what we repeatedly do. Then excellence is not an act, but a habit. So if you think about the truth in that, just take inventory of what you do regularly. Right now, it tells you everything about you. Okay. There's power in that also, because let's say you want to change something, or you're going to go after something, or something's come your way. You have the ability to change patterns and habits to get you to where you're going. And you're in charge of that. Nobody can take that from you. You get to apply that. You get to wake up every morning, open up your eyes and go, here's what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not saying that, this right, and it starts here. This is a powerful tool here. This brain is no different than any muscle that we have. The more you train it, the more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes, the more resilient it becomes, and the easier it can be to apply to things. When you've developed those tools, they can be applied to anything. And then, what is excellence? Excellence, there's another part of, visuals are a powerful tool, but self-reflection, that moment where you're standing in front of the mirror, always commit to that person. Make commitments there, take ownership there. And when you do that, things change. But in a moment of self-reflection, when you stand in front of a mirror at the end of a journey, a goal, a dream, a challenge, a deadline, and you say, hey, did you do your part? And you answer yes to that. I did everything I could. I got all my God-given abilities out. I exhausted everything that was available to me at that time. Man, I have peace with that. You can't ask for anything more than that. Have peace with that. It's when you can't say yes to that, but that goes back to ownership. And it goes back to, you're in charge of that. Okay, nobody knows your journey. Nobody knows where you're going like you do, and don't weigh on people, don't value other people's thoughts on your journey, because then you become their prisoner. You're responsible and in charge, and use that to empower yourself and go where you want to go and find your way, no matter where that is.
Merril, thank you so much for being on today and all the value you shared. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking forward to the journey, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Everybody, this has been another episode of Insights with Ovationz. I've been with Merril Hoge today, and I love the last thing he said. I'll leave you with this: self-reflection. At the end of the day, when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, ask yourself, have you done everything you needed to do, everything you could have done? And if you haven't, one thing you can do right now is go back and listen to this the last 25 minutes, and you're going to find literally probably 100 different things that you could start doing today. Appreciate your time, guys. We'll see you on the next one.